I've always been the kind of guy who never says no to a job. Money is money, and rent is due every month whether you're feeling picky or not. That's how I ended up as the night manager at the Whispering Pines Motel, a decrepit little place just off Route 33 in the armpit of Ohio. 17 rooms, a perpetually flickering neon sign, and a salary that was just enough to keep the debt collectors at bay for another month. When I showed up for the interview, the owner, a thin, spectral man named Mr. Caldwell, barely looked at my resume. His roomy eyes scanned my face instead, as if searching for something written there. "Ever heard of Skinwalker's son?" he asked, his voice like sandpaper on wood. I laughed, thinking it was some local slang I wasn't familiar with. "Can't say that I have." He didn't laugh back, just slid a folded piece of paper across his cluttered desk. "Night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., $18.50 an hour, no benefits, no questions. Follow these rules exactly." I opened the paper, expecting a list of mundane tasks, check in guests, maintain the logbook, that sort of thing. Instead, I found a handwritten list titled "The 10 Rules," all caps, underlined 3 times. I skimmed it, feeling a cold prickle crawl up my neck as I read things like, "If a guest checks in wearing someone else's face, do not acknowledge the imperfection," and "Never leave the front desk unattended between 3:27 a.m. and 3:42 a.m. I looked up, ready to laugh it off, but Mr. Caldwell's expression stopped me cold. His eyes held no humor, only a deep, resigned weariness. "Is this a joke?" I asked. "Do I look like I'm joking?" he replied. "This motel sits on special land. Things happen here, things most people wouldn't understand. Follow the rules, and you'll be fine. Break them." His voice trailed off, and he glanced toward a wall covered with framed photos of previous employees. Several frames contained only black rectangles where photos should have been. I should have walked out right then. Any sane person would have. But that $18.50 an hour was calling my name, and I've never been great at making smart decisions. So I signed the contract, pocketed the rule sheet, and showed up for my first shift the following night. The first few hours were uneventful. The motel was at half capacity, mostly truckers and a few couples who wanted privacy away from the highway. I busied myself with checking the register, organizing the key cards, and reading the rule sheet over and over until I'd memorized every word. I had no idea then that knowing those rules would be the only thing keeping me alive through what was about to become the longest night of my life, and all the nights that followed. Hello, viewers. If you wish your stories or experiences to be narrated by me, share them on our own subreddit, which you can join from the description below. I will pick the stories from the community and narrate them, and every once in a while, we will host a 3-hour story compilation. My first night at the Whispering Pines seemed determined to prove the rules were just Mr. Caldwell's idea of an elaborate hazing ritual. The ancient computer hummed, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the wall clock ticked away the minutes with painful slowness. By 1:30 a.m., I'd reorganized the pamphlet rack, memorized the fire evacuation plan, and read 3 chapters of a paperback I'd brought along. The rule sheet sat on the counter beside me, coffee rings staining its edges. I glanced at it again, trying to make sense of the bizarre instructions. Rule 1. Never invite a guest inside who arrives on foot between midnight and 4 a.m. They must enter of their own accord. Rule 2. If the phone rings exactly 3 times and stops, do not answer if it rings again within 30 seconds. Rule 3. Room 17 is to remain vacant at all times. If you see lights under the door, do not investigate alone. There were 7 more, equally strange. I folded the paper and slipped it into my shirt pocket. Superstitious nonsense, I figured. Probably stories made up over the years to keep night clerks alert during the graveyard shift. At 2:17 a.m., the front door chimed. I straightened up, surprised to see a guest at this hour. A woman stood just outside the glass door, her hand resting lightly on the handle. She wore a beige trench coat, her dark hair partially obscuring her face. My mind jumped immediately to Rule 1. She appeared to be on foot, no car in sight. But it didn't matter. She wasn't asking to be invited in. She entered slowly, her movements fluid yet somehow disjointed, like someone learning to walk in a new body. The thought came unbidden, and I shook it off. "Evening," I called out, forcing a smile. "Need a room for the night?" The woman approached the desk. Up close, I could see her face more clearly, and something about it made my skin crawl. Nothing obvious, just a subtle wrongness. Her features seemed to shift slightly when I wasn't looking directly at them, like a painting where the eyes follow you around the room. "Yes," she said, her voice oddly flat. "One night." I nodded, tapping at the keyboard. "ID and credit card, please." She placed both items on the counter. I glanced at her driver's license, Jennifer Mercer, 37, from Cincinnati. The photo didn't look much like her, but then again, driver's license photos rarely flatter anyone. As I processed her payment, I noticed her studying me with unnerving intensity. Her pupils seemed too large, consuming almost the entire iris. "You're new," she stated. "First night," I admitted. Her lips curved into what might generously be called a smile. "You know the rules, then?" My hand instinctively touched the paper in my pocket. "The motel policies?" "Yes, ma'am." "Not those rules," she said softly. "The real ones." Before I could respond, the desk phone rang. 1, 2, 3 rings, then silence. I froze, remembering Rule 2. The woman's expression didn't change, but her focus sharpened, like a predator spotting prey. The phone began ringing again. I kept my hand deliberately at my side, away from the receiver. "Aren't you going to answer that?" she asked, her voice suddenly lower, rougher. "It's probably a wrong number," I said, trying to sound casual. "If it's important, they'll call back." The ringing stopped after the 4th ring. The woman's shoulders tensed, then relaxed. Something like disappointment flickered across her face. "Room key?" she prompted. I handed her the key card for room 8, making sure our fingers didn't touch. "Checkout's at 11 a.m. Continental breakfast starts at 6. She took the key, her movements once again strange, too precise, too mechanical. "Which way?" I pointed toward the corridor. "Down the hall to your right." As she turned to leave, she looked back over her shoulder. For a split second, so brief I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it, her face seemed to ripple, like heat waves over asphalt. Beneath it, something else peered out. Something with too many teeth. "Sleep well," I called after her, the words sticking in my suddenly dry throat. When she was gone, I slumped back in my chair, heart hammering. I pulled out the rule sheet again, scanning it for anything about guests with strange faces. My eyes landed on Rule 6. Rule 6. Some guests aren't wearing their own faces. If you notice the seams where they don't quite fit, do not stare. Do not comment. Complete their check-in as normal, and avoid eye contact. I swallowed hard, suddenly very aware of how alone I was in this place. The woman in room 8 might not be wearing her own face, and I'd just given her a key and sent her on her way. The desk phone rang again, one single, shrill tone, then fell silent. Outside, the neon sign flickered, casting strange shadows across the empty parking lot. In the distance, something howled. a sound caught between a wolf and a human scream. 5 more hours until dawn. 5 more hours until my shift ended. I wasn't sure I was going to make it. The clock crawled toward 3 a.m., each minute stretching like taffy. I couldn't shake the image of that woman's face, the subtle wrongness of it, the way it seemed to slip when she turned away. I tried telling myself I was sleep-deprived, imagining things on my first overnight shift, but the rule sheet in my pocket felt increasingly heavy, like a stone. At 3:22 a.m., I remembered Rule 3 about room 17 remaining vacant. Curious, I pulled up the room registry on the ancient computer. According to the system, room 17 had been marked as under maintenance for the past 7 years. 7 years. Something compelled me to check the key rack behind the desk. Every room had a physical backup key, including room 17. I reached for it, then hesitated, my fingers inches away. Another rule swam into my mind. Rule 4. Never touch the key to room 17. If you find it in your hand, place it on the counter immediately and wash your hands with the soap in the staff bathroom. I withdrew my hand and wiped my sweaty palm on my slacks. The wall clock ticked to 3:27 a.m., and I suddenly remembered another rule. Rule 5. Never leave the front desk unattended between 3:27 a.m. and 3:42 a.m. If you must step away, ring the service bell 3 times before leaving and again upon return. I shifted in my seat, uncomfortably aware that my bladder was becoming increasingly insistent. Of all the times to need a bathroom break. I glanced at the clock. 15 minutes wasn't that long to wait, but the pressure was building, and I downed 2 cups of coffee earlier to stay alert. I eyed the service bell sitting on the counter. 3 rings before leaving, 3 upon return. Simple enough. My hand hovered over the bell. Something told me these rules weren't arbitrary. They were protection. But from what? The bathroom was just down a short hallway behind the desk. 60 seconds tops. I pressed down on the bell. Ding, ding, ding. The sound echoed strangely in the empty lobby, seeming to resonate longer than it should. I hurried down the hallway, flicking on the harsh fluorescent light in the tiny employee bathroom. As I washed my hands afterward, I caught my reflection in the spotted mirror. Pale, tired, uneasy. That's when I heard it. A soft thump from the direction of the lobby, like something heavy falling onto carpet. My heart rate doubled instantly. I remembered Rule 5. I wasn't supposed to leave the desk. What happens when you break the rules? I dried my hands quickly and reached for the doorknob, then froze. Through the crack beneath the door, where light from the bathroom spilled out into the hall, I saw a shadow pass. Something was out there, moving between me and the front desk. My breath caught in my throat. The shadow paused, as if sensing my presence. It was large, too large to be human, and seemed to shift and flow like smoke given form. I stood motionless, not daring to breathe, my hand still outstretched toward the doorknob. The shadow lingered for what felt like an eternity. Then, mercifully, it continued on, sliding away down the hall toward the guest rooms. I counted to 30, then eased the door open. The hallway was empty, but the air felt wrong, heavy and acrid, like the atmospheric pressure had dropped and the oxygen had been replaced with something thinner, tainted. I rushed back to the desk, my skin crawling with the certainty that eyes were watching me from somewhere. The service bell waited where I'd left it. I gave it 3 rings, my hand shaking so badly I nearly knocked it off the counter. Ding, ding, ding. The strange resonance again, but this time with an unmistakable sense of relief, as if the sound itself had power, had purpose. The clock read 3:34 a.m. I'd been gone for barely 5 minutes, but it felt like hours. I collapsed into my chair, heart hammering against my ribs. The phone rang, a single sharp trill that made me jump. Then silence. I mentally recited Rule 2, bracing myself in case it rang again. It didn't. Instead, a soft tapping started at the front door. Tap, 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 tap. I looked up, half expecting to see the woman from room 8, but there was only darkness beyond the glass, and the rhythmic tapping continuing. Tap, 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 tap. My eyes caught the rule sheet, now unfolded on the counter. Rule 7. If you hear tapping at the windows or doors after 3 a.m., do not look directly at the source. Keep your eyes lowered and ignore it, no matter how insistent it becomes. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Tap, 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 tap. I kept my gaze fixed on the computer screen, though I could see the front door in my peripheral vision. Something dark moved outside, pressed against the glass. The tapping continued, now joined by a slow, deliberate scratching sound, like fingernails or claws dragging across the surface. My every instinct screamed to look up, to confront whatever was trying to get my attention. But I remembered the black rectangles in those employee photos on Mr. Caldwell's wall. I kept my eyes down. Minutes passed. The tapping eventually stopped, replaced by a low, frustrated sound, half growl, half sigh. From the corner of my eye, I saw the darkness outside the door recede. At 3:42 a.m., the heavy feeling in the air suddenly lifted. I gasped, not realizing I'd been taking shallow breaths. The rule's time period had passed. I allowed myself to look up at the front door. Nothing there but the empty parking lot, dimly lit by the flickering neon sign. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a text from an unknown number. "You're learning." That's good, but the night is still young, and you've only faced the easy ones so far. Room 17 is waking up. Check the cameras. I hadn't been told about any security cameras, but sure enough, when I looked under the desk, I found an old monitor connected to what must have been the motel's surveillance system. I switched it on, cycling through the feeds until I found the one for the hallway outside room 17. The door was closed, the hallway empty. But as I watched, a thin line of yellow light appeared beneath the door. Someone, something, was inside room 17. The supposedly vacant room that, according to the registry, had been empty for 7 years. The light under the door began to pulse, like a heartbeat. And with each pulse, the walls of the hallway seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting ever so slightly. I remembered Rule 3. If you see lights under the door, do not investigate alone. But I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. The pulsing light beneath room 17's door hypnotized me. Each throb sent a corresponding ripple through the hallway walls on the security monitor. The text message burned in my mind. Room 17 is waking up. I fumbled for the rule sheet again, searching for anything about what to do when a supposedly vacant room decides to have a party at 4 a.m. My hands trembled as I smoothed out the paper. Rule 8. If room 17 shows signs of activity, call extension 17 from the front desk phone. Let it ring exactly 17 times. If someone answers, hang up immediately. If no one answers, leave the building for exactly 17 minutes. My throat tightened. Call the room? Talk to whatever was in there? Every instinct screamed against it, but the alternative, leaving the building, seemed equally terrifying after what I'd seen outside the front door. I reached for the desk phone with a shaking hand, pressed 1 to 7. The line clicked, then began to ring. 1, 2, 3. I watched the security monitor, counting rings while keeping my eyes fixed on that pulsing light under the door. 4, 5, 6. The light began to pulse in sync with the rings, brightening with each electronic trill. 7, 8, 9. The hallway walls were definitely moving now, like the corridor itself was breathing. The carpet rippled with each expansion. 10, 11, 12. A shadow appeared in the light beneath the door, something moving inside room 17, approaching the entrance. 13, 14, 15. The doorknob began to turn, rotating slowly, deliberately. I wanted to drop the phone, to run, but my body refused to obey. I was frozen, the receiver clutched in a white-knuckled grip. 16. The door to room 17 opened a crack, and light spilled into the hallway. Not the yellow glow I'd seen earlier, but a harsh, blinding white that caused the security camera to flare. In that brightness, I caught a glimpse of something standing in the doorway. Something tall and thin with too many joints, its silhouette wrong in ways my mind couldn't process. 17. The ringing stopped. No one had answered. With trembling fingers, I hung up the phone. The rule was clear. Leave the building for exactly 17 minutes. But outside was that tapping thing, and inside was whatever stood in room 17's doorway. I checked my watch, 4:03 a.m., then grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. Rules were rules, and so far following them had kept me alive. I moved quickly to the front entrance, pausing only long enough to make sure nothing waited immediately outside. The parking lot appeared empty, the asphalt glistening with recent rain I hadn't noticed falling. I stepped outside, the chill night air hitting my lungs like a slap. Where to go for 17 minutes? The only safe option seemed to be my car, parked at the far end of the lot. I jogged toward it, keys already in hand, looking neither left nor right. The sound came when I was halfway there, a wet, sliding noise from the darkness between the parked cars. I increased my pace, focusing only on reaching my vehicle. The noise followed, accompanied now by a rhythmic clicking, like someone rapidly snapping their fingers. I reached my car, fumbled with the keys, and practically dove inside, slamming the door and hitting the lock button in one frantic motion. The clicking sound stopped. In my rearview mirror, I saw nothing but empty parking spaces. 17 minutes. My watch read 4:06 a.m. I had to wait until 4:20 a.m. before going back inside. To distract myself, I pulled out my phone and Googled Skinwalker. Skinwalkers. Shape-shifting witches from Navajo legend who could assume animal forms or wear the skins of other humans. Malevolent creatures that mimicked their prey before consuming them. Beings that were almost, but not quite, perfect in their disguises. Like a woman whose face didn't quite fit. I scrolled through article after article, each more disturbing than the last. Some modern accounts described skinwalkers as having characteristics from multiple animals at once. A deer's antlers, a wolf's eyes, a human's posture. Others claimed they could perfectly mimic the voices of loved ones to lure victims. A soft thump on my car roof made me jump. Then another, and another. Something was walking on top of my car. I froze, barely breathing, as the footsteps continued, impossibly light, like something weighing hundreds of pounds was deliberately trying to move silently. I stared fixedly ahead, afraid to look up or use my mirrors. The footsteps stopped directly above me. I heard a long, slow drag across the metal, as if something was leaning down toward my windshield, trying to peek inside. My watch read 4:17 a.m. 3 more minutes. The car rocked slightly as whatever was on the roof shifted position. I heard sniffing, loud and deliberate, right above my head. It was smelling me, trying to catch my scent through the metal and glass. 4:18 a.m. A face dropped into view, upside down in front of my windshield. But it wasn't a face. Not really. It was like someone had taken pieces of different animals: a coyote's snout, an owl's eyes, a human's cheekbones, and stitched them together with zero regard for harmony or proportion. The resulting visage was a horror of mismatched parts, all centered around a mouth filled with needle-like teeth, arranged in concentric circles like a lamprey. That mouth opened, unhinging impossibly wide, and released a sound that might have been laughter if laughter could bleed. 4:19 a.m. I fumbled for the ignition, ready to start the car and drive, rules be damned. But before I could turn the key, the thing vanished from my windshield. The car rocked one last time as the weight lifted from the roof. 4:20 a.m. Time was up. I sat frozen for several more seconds, scanning the parking lot. Nothing moved in the dim glow of the neon sign. My time outside was done. I had to go back in. Those were the rules. I exited the car cautiously, clutching my keys between my fingers like a makeshift weapon. The lot remained still and silent as I made my way back to the motel entrance. No clicking noises, no dragging sounds. Nothing. Inside, everything appeared normal. The desk was as I'd left it, the lobby empty. I checked the security monitor immediately. The door to room 17 was closed. No light shone beneath it. The hallway walls were solid and unmoving. I collapsed into my chair, exhausted and shaken. What the hell kind of job had I taken? What kind of place was this? I considered walking out right then, quitting without notice. But something told me that abandoning my post before dawn would be the worst rule to break of all. I picked up the rule sheet once more, scanning for anything that might help. Rule 9. If a guest calls the front desk and asks, "Is it time yet?" logically answer only with, "Not until the sun rises. Do not engage in further conversation." The phone rang immediately, as if triggered by my reading the rule. I stared at it, heart pounding in my chest. After 3 rings, I picked up. "Front desk," I managed, my voice surprisingly steady. "Is it time yet?" asked a child's voice, high, innocent, and completely out of place at 4:30 in the morning. I swallowed hard. "Not until the sun rises." A pause, then a giggle, but not a child's giggle. It was the same bleating laughter I'd heard outside my car, now piped directly into my ear. "Are you sure about that?" the voice asked, dropping an octave with each word until it was a guttural growl by the end of the question. I remembered the rule. Do not engage in further conversation. I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I left it unanswered, watching it vibrate against the desk with each shrill tone. After 7 rings, it stopped. The security monitor caught my eye. Activity in the hallway. A guest emerging from room 8. The woman with the ill-fitting face. She was fully dressed despite the hour, still wearing that beige trench coat. She moved with that same unsettling fluidity, like her joints weren't quite where they should be. She walked directly to room 17 and stopped outside the door, placed her hand on the wood and leaned close, as if listening. Then she turned her head, slowly, deliberately, and looked directly at the security camera. She smiled, her face stretching unnaturally wide, and raised her hand in a little wave. The feed cut to static. The security monitor remained nothing but static, a shifting gray snowstorm where the hallway feed should be. I frantically cycled through the other cameras, parking lot, side entrance, back hallway, all functioning perfectly. Just the one outside room 17 had gone dark. My mind raced with possibilities, each worse than the last. Had the woman from room 8 disabled the camera? Or had something about her presence caused it to malfunction? And more importantly, what was she doing at room 17? I needed to check. Not investigate alone, the rule had said. but who else was there? I reached for the phone, thinking to call Mr. Caldwell, then stopped. Something told me calling the owner at nearly 5 a.m. would be breaking an unwritten rule, one that might have consequences worse than whatever waited in that hallway. My phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. Don't even think about it. Stay at the desk. Dawn is coming. They get desperate before first light. Who was sending these? How did they know what I was considering? I typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came seconds later. Someone who followed the rules. Most of them, anyway. Before I could respond, the desk phone rang. Not the shrill electronic sound from before, but a deep, sonorous toll like an old church bell. It rang once, then fell silent. I stared at it, baffled. The ancient beige phone shouldn't be capable of making such a sound. As I watched, the cord connecting the handset to the base began to twist and coil on its own, like a living thing. It rose up, swaying like a cobra preparing to strike. I backed away from the desk, bumping into the key rack. The phone cord stretched impossibly long, reaching toward me. The handset lifted on its own, hovering in the air. From its speaker came a voice, not the child from earlier, but something ancient and dry, like rustling autumn leaves. "The woman isn't one of ours," it said. "She's something else, something worse. Check the last rule." The handset dropped, clattering onto the desk. The cord went limp. With trembling hands, I retrieved the rule sheet from my pocket. I'd memorized the first 9 rules, but I'd been too overwhelmed to properly process the 10th. Rule 10. If you survive until dawn, burn this paper in the metal trash can behind the building. If you don't, your replacement will find it, as you found it from the last night manager. Under no circumstances should you take this paper home with you. The previous night manager had left this list for me. Had they survived? The black rectangles on Mr. Caldwell's wall flashed through my mind. I checked the time, 5:17 a.m. Less than 2 hours until my shift ended at 7. Less than an hour until dawn, which this time of year came around 6:30. I could make it. I had to. A soft sound drew my attention back to the security monitor. The static from the room 17 camera had cleared, replaced by a view of the hallway. It was empty. No sign of the woman from room 8, and room 17's door was firmly closed, no light visible underneath. I frowned, leaning closer. Something was off about the image. The hallway looked different somehow. The carpet pattern wasn't quite right, and the room numbers were on the wrong side of the doors. It wasn't the hallway at all. It was a perfect mirror image, flipped horizontally. As I watched, something moved at the far end of the corridor. A hunched shape, crawling along the ceiling like a spider, moving slowly toward the camera. Its head twisted at an impossible angle to stare directly into the lens. I yanked my gaze away, heart pounding. When I dared to look again seconds later, the feed had returned to normal. The hallway was empty, room numbers on the correct side, no ceiling crawler in sight. The front door chimed, signaling a new arrival. I jumped, spinning toward the entrance. A man in his mid-40s stood there, dressed in a rumpled business suit, carrying a small overnight bag. Completely ordinary, except for the fact that he was soaking wet despite there being no rain. "Need a room," he said, approaching the desk. Water dripped from his clothes, forming small puddles on the carpet. "Of course," I replied automatically, professionalism taking over despite my terror. "Just need an ID and credit card." He placed both on the counter. As I took his driver's license, our fingers brushed, and I gasped at the temperature of his skin, ice cold and somehow slippery, like wet clay. I forced myself to look at the ID. Richard Cooper, 47, from Columbus. The photo matched. but there was something off about the man standing before me. His skin had a grayish cast, and his eyes were slightly cloudy, like those of a dead fish. I suddenly remembered another part of one of the rules I'd already seen. Rule 6. Continued. Some guests aren't wearing their own faces. If you notice the seams where they don't quite fit, do not stare. Do not comment. Complete their check-in as normal and avoid eye contact. This wasn't about ill-fitting faces, though. This man looked drowned. I processed his payment with shaking hands, hyper-aware of the water pooling around his feet. "Any rooms on the first floor?" he asked, voice gurgling slightly. I swallowed hard. "We have room 12 available, just down the hall on the right." He nodded, droplets falling from his hair onto the counter. "Is there a pool here?" "No, sir," I answered automatically. "No pool." He smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too numerous, too tightly packed in his mouth. "Shame. I'm a big fan of swimming. Can't seem to get enough of the water." I handed him the key card, careful not to touch his fingers again. "Checkout's at 11 a.m. Breakfast starts at 6. "I won't be staying for breakfast," he said, still smiling that too full smile. "I never see the sun these days." He turned and walked away, leaving wet footprints on the carpet. As he passed beneath one of the lobby lights, I noticed something else. There was no shadow where there should have been one. I watched him disappear down the hallway toward room 12, then immediately checked the security feed. The camera showed him walking normally, the back of his wetsuit plastered to his body. But something followed behind him. Something that wasn't visible in the lobby but appeared clearly on the camera feed. It looked like a long, sinuous shape made of black water flowing along the floor in his wake. It moved with purpose, almost protectively, like a guard dog trailing its master. As the man entered room 12, the water shadow slipped under the door after him. I sat heavily in my chair, my legs suddenly too weak to support me. What had I just checked in? And what was it doing in room 12? The desk phone rang once more, normal sounding this time. I hesitated, then answered. Front desk. "Hi, this is Jennifer in room 8. The woman with the ill-fitting face. "I seem to have a problem with my shower. Could you send someone to take a look?" My mouth went dry. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but our maintenance person isn't on duty until 8 a.m. I can make a note for them to check first thing." A pause. "I see. Perhaps you could come take a look yourself?" "It won't take long." Every alarm bell in my head went off at once. "I'm afraid I can't leave the front desk right now, ma'am. Hotel policy." Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, becoming deeper, raspier. "Are you sure about that? I'm really quite uncomfortable up here all alone." I glanced at the clock, 5:43 a.m., less than an hour until dawn. "I apologize for the inconvenience," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "If you'd like to switch rooms, I could arrange that." "No," she said. The words stretched out unnaturally long. "I like room 8. It's close to room 17. So very, very close." The line went dead. I immediately checked the security feed for the hallway. The woman, Jennifer, stood outside her door, staring directly into the camera again. She wasn't moving toward room 17 this time. Instead, she pointed at her door, then made a beckoning gesture. "Come here," the gesture said. "Come to room 8. I shook my head, though she couldn't see me. No way in hell was I going anywhere near her room. As if reading my thoughts, she frowned, head tilting at an angle no human neck should be able to achieve. Then she smiled, nodded once, and retreated into her room. Minutes later, The drowned man emerged from room 12, leaving a trail of water behind him. He walked purposefully toward room 8 and knocked on the door. It opened immediately, and he entered without hesitation. I stared at the monitor, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. The guests were congregating, planning something, and dawn was still 40 minutes away. 6 o'clock. 1 hour until the end of my shift. 30 minutes until dawn. I'd never watched a clock so intently in my life, mentally urging the hands to move faster with each passing second. The lobby had gone completely silent. No more phone calls, no more arrivals. Even the constant electrical hum of the ancient computers seemed muted, as if the building itself was holding its breath. I kept my eyes glued to the security monitor, watching the hallway outside rooms 8 and 17. After the drowned man had entered room 8, there had been no further movement. What were they doing in there? Planning? Waiting? For what? My phone buzzed again. They're gathering. They know you've been following the rules. They're going to try to make you break one before dawn. Stay at the desk. I typed back, "Who are you? How do you know all this?" The reply came instantly. "The night manager who came before you." I didn't burn the rules. I took them home. Big mistake. The previous night manager had broken Rule 10, and now they were... What? Watching? Warning me? "What happened to you?" I typed. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, they followed me home. They're still here, with me, in me. They never leave now. Before I could respond, all the lights in the lobby flickered, then dimmed to a sickly yellow glow. The temperature plummeted, my breath suddenly visible in front of my face. The security monitor flickered, then displayed a new image. Not the hallway, but the inside of room 8. What I saw made no sense. The room should have contained a bed, a dresser, a bathroom door. Instead, it showed a vast, cavernous space, much larger than the actual dimensions of the motel room. The walls dripped with a black, tar-like substance that moved against gravity, flowing upward toward the ceiling. In the center stood the woman and the drowned man, but they weren't alone. At least a dozen other figures crowded the impossible space. Some were humanoid, wearing mismatched faces or moving with that same wrong fluidity. Others were more monstrous, shapes assembled from animal parts, things with too many limbs or eyes, creatures that seemed to shift and change even as I watched them. They stood in a circle around a shape drawn on the floor. Not a pentagram or any occult symbol I recognized, but something organic and asymmetrical, like a massive fingerprint or the cross-section of a diseased brain. At the circle's center was a hole in the floor, perfectly black, from which tendrils of darkness reached up like grasping fingers. The woman from room 8, Jennifer, looked directly at the camera, directly at me, and smiled. Her face split horizontally, opening like a flower to reveal rows of teeth and a writhing mass where her skull should have been. She raised her hand and pointed at something out of frame. The camera panned, revealing a door within room 8 that shouldn't exist, a door marked 17. The feed cut back to the normal hallway view, empty and silent. But I didn't believe it for a second. That gathering was happening right now, mere feet away from where I sat. I looked at the clock again. 6:10 a.m. 20 minutes until dawn. I could make it. Just had to stay put, follow the rules, not get lured away from the desk. That's when I heard it. A child's cry coming from somewhere in the motel. Not a cry of fear or pain, but the confused, disoriented sobbing of a lost child. "Hello?" A small voice called out. "Is anyone there? I can't find my mom and dad." The sound was coming from the hallway near the guest rooms. I checked the security feed. Nothing. The hallway appeared empty, but the crying continued, growing more distressed. Please, anyone? I'm scared. It's dark and I don't know where I am. Every instinct told me to go help, to find this lost child. But the mysterious texts had been clear. Stay at the desk, and none of the rules mentioned anything about responding to cries for help. The sobbing grew louder, more desperate. Please help me. Something's following me. I can hear it breathing. I gripped the edge of the desk until my knuckles turned white. It was a trick. It had to be. There was no lost child, just another attempt to make me break the rules. The crying abruptly stopped, replaced by a terrified scream that cut off mid-sound. Then silence. I stared at the monitor, heart hammering. Nothing in the hallway, though I could swear the air looked thicker, somehow more textured than before. The front door chimed. I jerked my head up to see a couple in their 30s rushing in, wild-eyed and disheveled. The woman clutched a bundled blanket to her chest. The man supported her with an arm around her shoulders. We need help, the man gasped. Our daughter, she's sick. We were driving to the hospital when our car broke down. Please, do you have a phone we can use to call an ambulance? They approached the desk, and I got a better look at them. They appeared normal, flushed with panic and exertion, but human. The woman held the bundle protectively, rocking it slightly. Please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. She's burning up. She needs help now. I hesitated. This seemed legitimate, a genuine emergency, but something felt off. Why stop at a motel instead of knocking on a resident's door? The nearest house was less than a quarter-mile down the road. I can call for you, I offered, reaching for the desk phone. The couple exchanged a quick glance. Actually, the man said, his tone shifting slightly, we really need to use a restroom first. Is there one we can use? Just for a minute, then we'll call. I nodded toward the small public restroom off the lobby. Right there. We need privacy, the woman said. For the baby. Do you have an employee restroom in the back? Warning bells clanged in my head. They were trying to get me away from the desk. I'm sorry, that area is staff only, I replied. But you're welcome to use the public restroom, and I can call an ambulance immediately. The woman's expression darkened. We really need to use the back restroom. It's an emergency. I stood my ground. I can call 911 right now. The man stepped closer, his demeanor changing, becoming more aggressive. Listen, buddy, my daughter is sick. We need to use your back restroom. Now. I looked at the bundle in the woman's arms. It hadn't moved once. Not a single twitch or wiggle. No sound. What kind of sick child, even a very ill one, stays that completely still? I'd be happy to call an ambulance, I repeated, reaching for the phone. The woman's face contorted with rage. Just take us to the back, she snarled, her voice dropping to an inhuman growl. The blanket in her arms shifted, but not like a baby moving. It collapsed inward, as if suddenly empty. At the same time, something moved beneath her skin, ridges and protrusions racing across her face and neck, like creatures burrowing just below the surface. The man's eyes had changed, the pupils elongating vertically like a cat's. His fingers stretched, the joints popping audibly as they extended to impossible lengths. Last chance, he said, voice distorting. Take us to the back, away from the desk, or we take you. I stood frozen, terror washing through me in icy waves. They weren't even trying to maintain their disguises anymore. The clock read 6:23 a.m. 7 minutes until dawn. The couple, the things, moved in unison, starting to circle around opposite ends of the desk to trap me. I backed up against the wall, frantically searching for a weapon, an escape route, anything. My eyes fell on the rule sheet. Rule 5 mentioned the service bell. Ring it 3 times before leaving the desk, 3 times upon return. But there was nothing about ringing it while staying at the desk. With nothing to lose, I lunged for the bell and struck it hard. Ding! The creatures flinched, their transformations momentarily pausing. Ding! They hissed in unison, raising their arms as if to shield themselves from the sound. Ding! The effect was immediate and dramatic. Both creatures recoiled as if struck, their partially transformed bodies convulsing. The woman, or what had been pretending to be a woman, shrieked, a high, piercing sound that hurt my ears. The man-thing backed away, its elongated fingers curling into claws. I struck the bell again. Ding! 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 With each tone, the creatures retreated further, their bodies seeming to come apart at the seams, literally. Skin split, revealing not blood and bone but a churning darkness beneath, like animated oil. They backed toward the entrance, still hissing and spitting their rage. Something new caught my attention, movement on the security monitor. The hallway was filling with shapes emerging from rooms 8, 12, and the others. Shambling, crawling, flowing forms heading toward the lobby. The gathering was breaking up, all of them coming for me at once. 6:26 a.m. 4 minutes to dawn. The first of the hallway creatures appeared at the entrance to the lobby. The thing that had been Jennifer, her face now a blooming horror of teeth and writhing appendages. Behind her came the drowned man, water gushing from his mouth and eyes in impossible quantities. And behind him, more shapes, some barely recognizable as once human. I kept ringing the bell, though my arm ached with the effort. Ding! 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 They winced with each sound, but kept advancing, more desperate now, their collective focus on me almost palpable. The woman who had pretended to have a sick baby lunged suddenly, her arm stretching across the desk like rubber to grab my wrist, stopping me from ringing the bell again. Her skin felt wrong against mine, cold and slick like wet leather. I struggled to free myself as the others closed in, their misshapen bodies crowding the lobby. 6:28 a.m. The first hint of gray light appeared at the windows, barely perceptible but definitely there. Dawn was coming. The creatures saw it too. Their movements became more frantic, more desperate. The one gripping my wrist tightened its hold painfully, trying to drag me over the desk. The others pressed closer, reaching for me with hands, claws, tentacles, appendages I had no names for. "You've been so good with the rules," Jennifer Thing purred, her voice a grotesque parody of human speech. "Just one little mistake now. That's all we need. Come with us to room 17. See what waits there." I fought against the grip on my wrist, fumbling with my free hand for anything to use as a weapon. My fingers closed around the heavy reception bell. With all my strength, I swung the bell, smashing it into the face of the creature holding me. It shrieked, releasing my wrist as its features caved inward like a rotten pumpkin. Instead of blood, a thick black substance oozed from the wound, smelling of rotting vegetation and stagnant water. 6:29 a.m. The gray light at the windows strengthened, bringing definition to the shapes massed before me. In the growing light, they seemed less substantial somehow, their outlines blurring, forms becoming translucent. "No!" The drowned man howled, his voice bubbling wetly. "Take him! Take him now!" They surged forward in a final desperate rush, a wave of twisted bodies and reaching limbs. I scrambled backward, knocking over my chair, back pressed against the wall. And then 6:30 a.m. dawn. Sunlight spilled through the windows, harsh and golden and beautiful. It fell across the creatures like a physical blow. Where it touched them, their bodies smoked and wavered, becoming transparent, insubstantial. They screamed in unison, a a sound of rage and thwarted hunger that made my ears ring. The woman who had grabbed me dissolved before my eyes, her substance evaporating like mist. The others retreated, flowing back down the hallway in a chaotic rush, seeking the darkness of their rooms. Within seconds, the lobby was empty. Only puddles of that black, oily substance remained on the carpet where they had stood. I collapsed against the wall, legs finally giving out, gasping for breath. My wrist throbbed where the creature had gripped it, the skin already bruising in a pattern no human hand could make. I had survived until dawn. I had followed the rules. But the sun rising didn't end my shift. I still had 30 minutes until 7 a.m. Sunlight streamed through the windows, transforming the lobby into a mundane motel reception area once again. The puddles of black substance had evaporated, leaving only faint stains on the carpet. If I hadn't lived through the night, I might have mistaken them for ordinary watermarks or coffee spills. My wrist throbbed where the creature had grabbed me. The bruise was darkening by the minute, forming a pattern of 5 elongated finger marks that stretched halfway up my forearm. I pulled my sleeve down to cover it, not wanting to look at the reminder of what had just happened. The clock read 6:37 a.m. 23 minutes until my shift officially ended. I had survived until dawn, but Rule 10 was clear. I needed to burn the rule sheet before leaving. That meant going outside to the metal trash can behind the building. I gathered my composure, straightening my rumpled shirt and retrieving my overturned chair. The quiet normalcy of the lobby felt surreal after the horror of minutes before. Sunlight, empty chairs, the soft hum of the vending machine. It was like the motel was pretending nothing had happened. I checked the security monitor, cycling through the feeds. The hallway was empty. Room doors closed. No movement anywhere. Had the creatures retreated to their rooms, or had they vanished with the dawn? I wasn't eager to find out. My phone buzzed with another text from the previous night manager. "You made it to dawn. Good job. But be careful. Some of them can tolerate sunlight for short periods, burn the rules, and leave immediately. Don't go back to your apartment tonight." I frowned at that last part. Don't go back to my apartment? Where was I supposed to go? I typed back, "Why not my apartment?" The response came quickly. "They've seen you now. They can find you. Stay somewhere new tonight. Somewhere they can't follow." Before I could ask what that meant, the desk phone rang. After the night I'd had, the ordinary electronic trill nearly sent me jumping out of my skin. I let it ring twice before answering, my hand hesitating over the receiver. "Front desk," I said cautiously. "Ah, good morning." It was Mr. Caldwell, his sandpaper voice unnervingly cheerful. "Just checking in. How was your first night?" I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Would he believe me if I told him about the shape-shifting creatures, the impossible room, the desperate battle at dawn? "Eventful," I managed finally. He chuckled, the sound dry and brittle. "I imagine so. Did you follow the rules?" "Yes," I said. "All of them." Good. He paused. "Your day relief will be there at 7. Brenda's a bit grumpy in the mornings, but she's reliable. Don't mind her questions about the night shift. She works days for a reason." "Mr. Caldwell," I began. "About room 17. "Ah," he interrupted sharply. "Best not to discuss that over the phone. We can talk when you come in tonight." Tonight. He expected me to come back for another shift. The thought made my stomach clench. "Listen," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I'm not sure this job is for me. Last night was—" "Your pay will be delivered in cash today," he cut in smoothly. "Double what we agreed upon. Consider it a bonus for following the rules. And tonight? Well, tonight will be easier." They've tested you now. They know you're not easily tricked. Double pay. The numbers flashed in my mind. I could cover this month's rent and utilities with one night's work, and if tonight would be easier. "I'll see you at 11 p.m., Mr. Caldwell said, not waiting for my response. "Oh, and don't forget Rule 10. Very important, that one." The line went dead. I sat there, receiver in hand, wondering what I'd gotten myself into, and more importantly, wondering if I could get myself out. The security monitor caught my eye. Movement in the hallway. I tensed, expecting to see one of the creatures from earlier. Instead, it was an ordinary-looking middle-aged man in plaid pajamas, yawning as he shuffled toward the ice machine. I checked the registry. Mr. Davis in room 5. A regular human who had checked in yesterday evening, apparently unaware of what kind of establishment he was staying in. He got his ice and shuffled back to his room, oblivious to the horrors that had unfolded just hours before. How many normal guests stayed here, I wondered. How many left without ever knowing what lurked in the other rooms? 6:52 a.m. 8 minutes until the end of my shift. Time to fulfill Rule 10 before Brenda arrived. I grabbed the rule sheet and my jacket, then hesitated. Going outside after everything that had happened seemed risky, even in daylight, but staying inside meant breaking a rule, and I'd seen what happened to those who did that. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out from behind the desk for the first time since the dawn confrontation. My legs felt weak, unsteady. I made my way to the front door, scanning the parking lot before pushing it open. The morning air was crisp, the sky a pale blue with wisps of cloud. Birds chirped in the trees surrounding the property. It all seemed so normal, so safe. But I knew better now. I walked quickly around the side of the building, alert for any movement. The metal trash can stood in a small concrete area behind the motel, near the dumpsters. It was an old oil drum, rusty and dented, with "burn" painted on the side in faded white letters. As I approached, I noticed something odd. The area around the trash can was blackened, the concrete scorched as if from years of fires. A box of matches sat on a nearby cinder block, conveniently placed. How many night managers had stood in this exact spot, burning their copy of the rules? I struck a match with shaking fingers and held it to the corner of the paper. The flame caught immediately, the rule sheet burning with unnatural speed, the fire a strange bluish color. The smoke that rose from it formed patterns in the air, twisting shapes that seemed almost deliberate before dispersing. As the last of the paper turned to ash, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Rule 10 fulfilled. I had survived my first night and followed all the rules. A noise behind me made me spin around. A woman stood there, short, plump, with graying hair pulled into a severe bun. She wore the same maroon vest that had been issued to me as part of my uniform. "You must be the new night guy," she said, her voice flat and unimpressed. "I'm Brenda." My day relief. I nodded, trying to appear normal. "Nice to meet you." Her eyes narrowed as she looked me over. "Rough night?" I must have looked terrible, disheveled, pale, bruised. "You could say that." "Humph." She glanced at the still-smoking trash can. "Followed Rule 10, I see. Good. At least you're not as stupid as the last one." She knew about the rules. Of course she did. She worked here. But her casual mention of them startled me nonetheless. "What happened to the last night manager?" I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer from the texts. Brenda's face darkened. "Idiot took the rule sheet home. Wanted to study it," he said. "Found him 3 days later in his apartment." She shuddered. "Or what was left of him." "What do you mean?" "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to, new guy." She started toward the back entrance, then paused. Word of advice: don't come back tonight. Call in sick. Better yet, quit. Find another job. Mr. Caldwell already called. He's expecting me. She turned, her expression unreadable. Of course he is. He always knows which ones will come back. She shook her head. Your funeral. With that cheerful assessment, she disappeared inside. I stood in the morning sunlight, the smell of ashes still in my nostrils, wondering what to do next. I couldn't go home, according to the texts. I couldn't not show up tonight, or whatever had happened to the previous night manager might happen to me. I was caught, as surely as if I'd been snared in a trap. The creatures had tested me, and in surviving, I'd somehow bound myself more tightly to this place. As I walked to my car, I noticed something on the roof. Scratch marks, long and deep, cutting through the paint to the metal beneath. Evidence that last night had been real, not some stress-induced hallucination. I got in and started the engine, catching a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. I looked haggard, eyes bloodshot, face pale. But it was my own face at least, not something wearing my face like an ill-fitting mask. Where would I go? Not home, not if I wanted to survive. A hotel was out of the question. The irony of escaping one cursed lodging only to risk another was not lost on me. Maybe a friend's couch, though I'd have to concoct a reasonable explanation for showing up unannounced at 7:30 in the morning, looking like I'd seen a ghost, or several ghosts, and things much worse than ghosts. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced back at the motel. In the morning light, it looked almost charming, quaint even. The Whispering Pines Motel sign swayed gently in the breeze, no longer flickering now that the neon was off. A figure stood at the window of room 8, watching me leave. I couldn't make out features at this distance, just a silhouette against the glass. But something about the way it stood, perfectly still, head tilted at an unnatural angle, told me it wasn't human, and it wasn't alone. One by one, figures appeared at other windows, rooms 12, 6, 3, all watching, all waiting, for night to fall again, for me to return. I pressed the accelerator harder, eager to put distance between myself and the motel. But even as the building receded in my rearview mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't escaping at all. I was just on a temporary reprieve. Clock ticking down to 11 p.m., when I'd have to face those creatures again. Unless I ran. Unless I kept driving and never looked back. But the bruise on my wrist throbbed, the finger marks darkening to an impossible black. And somehow I knew they would find me wherever I went, because I'd seen them now. And worse, they had seen me. I drove aimlessly for an hour, my mind racing faster than the car. The events of the night replayed in endless loops. The woman with the ill-fitting face, the thing on the roof of my car, the desperate rush of creatures as dawn approached. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see something following me, but the road remained mercifully empty. Eventually, fatigue and hunger forced me to stop at a diner just off the highway. The normalcy of the place was jarring after my night at the Whispering Pines. Fluorescent lights, the clatter of dishes, waitresses calling orders, the smell of coffee and bacon. Regular people starting their regular day, untouched by the horrors I'd witnessed. I slid into a booth by the window, ordered coffee and breakfast, then pulled out my phone. 3 new texts from the unknown number. Did you burn the rules? Don't go home. They'll be waiting. Are you going back tonight? I stared at the screen, tempted to block the number. But this person, the previous night manager, was the only one who seemed to understand what I was facing. Yes, I burned them, I replied, and I don't know if I'm going back. Should I? The response came as my food arrived. No, but they won't let you go easily. especially after you survived a night. You're special now. Special. The word made my skin crawl. I didn't want to be special to those things. I wanted to forget they existed. What are they? Really? I typed. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Finally. Not skinwalkers, not exactly. Something older. Something that learned to wear skins. The motel sits on a threshold, a weak point between here and somewhere else. They want to cross over permanently, but they need anchors. Human anchors. I swallowed hard, my appetite vanishing. Like you? Yes. Like me. I broke Rule 10, took the paper home. They followed. Now they're always with me. Inside me. Watching through my eyes. I glanced around the diner, suddenly paranoid that something might be watching me right now. If I don't go back tonight, what happens? I asked. They'll find you eventually, but you'll have time to run, to hide, maybe enough time. And if I do go back? The reply took longer this time. You might survive another night, and another, but sooner or later, you'll make a mistake, break a rule, or they'll change the rules. They always do, eventually. The phone fell silent after that. No more texts. No matter what questions I sent, I was on my own. After breakfast, I checked into a cheap motel several towns over, the irony not lost on me. This one was a generic chain with bright lighting and bland decor. No strange rules posted anywhere. Just a normal, forgettable room where I might get some sleep. I set an alarm for 7 p.m., giving myself plenty of time to decide whether to return to the Whispering Pines for my second shift. Then I collapsed onto the bed, exhaustion finally catching up with me. Sleep brought no peace, only dreams of endless hallways, doors that opened onto impossible spaces, and creatures that wore human skins like ill-fitting suits. I woke repeatedly, gasping and sweating, each time checking to make sure I was still alone in the room. The bruise on my wrist had spread, the black finger marks now extending almost to my elbow. The skin around them felt cold to the touch, slightly numb. I tried not to think about what that might mean. When my alarm finally blared at 7 p.m., I'd made no decision. Go back or run. Fulfill my obligation or save myself. Neither option promised safety. I showered, dressed, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. No new texts from the previous night manager. No calls from Mr. Caldwell asking where I was. Just the slow tick of minutes passing, bringing me closer to the 11 p.m. shift. As I deliberated, I opened my laptop and searched for information about the Whispering Pines Motel. The official website was bare bones, an outdated template showing room rates and amenities that oversold the shabby reality. Nothing unusual there. Next, I searched news archives for any strange incidents associated with the motel. Over the past 30 years, at least 7 people had disappeared in or around the Whispering Pines. Most were employees, night managers, maintenance workers, cleaning staff. One was a guest who had apparently been assigned to room 17 due to an administrative error. Police investigations found nothing conclusive. People simply vanished, leaving belongings behind but no signs of struggle. The most recent disappearance had been just 3 months ago, a night manager named Thomas Reeves. That had to be the person texting me, which meant he wasn't actually missing. He was somewhere else, with them, inside him, as he'd put it. I checked the time, 8:47 p.m. If I was going to run, I needed to do it now. I could drive through the night, cross state lines, use cash instead of cards to avoid leaving a trail. It wouldn't work forever. The previous night manager had made that clear. But it might buy me time. Time for what, though? To live in fear, constantly looking over my shoulder? to wait for the inevitable moment when I'd open a door and find one of those things wearing a human face, waiting for me. The bruise on my arm throbbed, seeming to pulse with my heartbeat. I pulled back my sleeve to look at it and froze. The blackness had continued to spread while I slept, thin tendrils now reaching toward my shoulder. And something was moving beneath my skin, subtle ripples, like something swimming just below the surface. Panic surged through me. I wasn't free of them after all. I'd brought something back with me, something that was now inside me, growing, spreading. I grabbed my phone and frantically texted the previous night manager. "There's something in my arm. The bruise is spreading. What do I do?" No response. "Please, I need help." Nothing. 9:15 p.m., less than 2 hours until my shift. I paced the motel room, mind racing. If something from the Whispering Pines was already inside me, running wouldn't help. But going back seemed like surrendering to whatever fate awaited me there. Unless the rules that protected me last night could help me again. Mr. Caldwell had said they'd tested me, that they knew I wasn't easily tricked. Maybe there was a way to use that to my advantage. At 9:30 p.m., I made my decision. I checked out of the motel, got in my car, and started driving. Not away, but back toward the Whispering Pines. I stopped at a gas station along the way, buying energy drinks, salt, remembering old superstitions about protective circles, and a small silver crucifix that hung among the keychains at the register. I had no idea if any of these would help, but they made me feel marginally better. At 10:45 p.m., I pulled into the Whispering Pines parking lot. The neon sign flickered to life as I arrived, as if the motel had been waiting for me. A few cars were parked in front of rooms, ordinary guests who had no idea what kind of place they were sleeping in. Brenda's car still sat near the office. My day relief wouldn't be happy to see me, not after her warning to stay away. But I needed information, and she seemed to know more than she'd let on. I entered the lobby, the bell above the door announcing my arrival. Brenda looked up from her magazine, surprise quickly replaced by disapproval. "You actually came back," she said flatly. "Didn't think you were that stupid." "I need to know more," I replied, approaching the desk. "About the motel, about them, about the rules." She sighed, setting down her magazine. "What good will it do?" "You already signed the contract. You're already marked." Her eyes flicked to my arm, somehow knowing about the bruise despite my long sleeves. "Please," I said. "I survived one night. I want to survive another." Something in my tone must have reached her. Her expression softened slightly. "No one survives long term," she said quietly. "That's the first thing you need to understand. This job is a death sentence with an uncertain execution date." "Then why do you work here?" "Day shift is different. They're dormant mostly. And I have protection." She touched a pendant around her neck, something tribal-looking carved from bone. "What are they?" "The previous night manager said they're not really skinwalkers." Brenda glanced at the clock. 10:52 p.m. "You should get ready for your shift, but I'll tell you what I know." She lowered her voice. "They're parasites from somewhere else. They need hosts to exist fully in our world. The motel is their hunting ground, their foothold." "And Mr. Caldwell? What's his role in all this?" A strange expression crossed her face. "Caldwell is complicated. He made a deal a long time ago. He keeps the motel running, provides them with potential hosts, and in return what? He gets to live, after a fashion." She stood, gathering her purse. "Listen carefully. The rules will change tonight. They always do on the second night. There will be a new rule sheet waiting for you, with one addition. Pay attention to the new rule. It's usually the most important one. How do you know all this? I asked. She paused at the door. I've been the day manager for 27 years. I've seen a lot of night managers come and go. She gave me a sad smile. For what it's worth, I hope you make it longer than most. With that, she was gone, leaving me alone in the lobby as the clock ticked toward 11 p.m. I moved behind the desk, settling into the chair that already felt familiar despite having spent only one night in it. As promised, a new rule sheet waited there, identical to the one I'd burned except for the addition at the bottom. Rule 11. If you feel something growing inside you, do not attempt to remove it. Address it by name, passenger, and promise to bring it home. It will go dormant until you break a rule. I stared at the words, my arm throbbing in response, the thing beneath my skin squirming as if recognizing itself in the description. Passenger. I had been infected after all, carrying a piece of the Whispering Pines with me even after I'd left. And now I was back, sitting at the desk as the clock struck 11 p.m., beginning my second night in this nightmare. But this time, I knew more. This time, I had 11 rules to follow. And this time, I wasn't just trying to survive until dawn. I was looking for a way out. It's been 3 weeks since my second night at the Whispering Pines Motel. 3 weeks since I discovered what happens when you follow Rule 11. 3 weeks since I learned there is, in fact, a way out. I should explain. My second night was actually quieter than the first. The woman with the ill-fitting face didn't return. The drowned man stayed in his room. Even room 17 remained quiet, no light spilling from beneath the door. It was as if they were giving me space, watching from a distance to see what I would do. The passenger, the thing beneath my skin that had spread from the bruise on my wrist, grew more active as the night progressed. I could feel it moving inside me, stretching tendrils throughout my body. The rule had said to address it by name, to promise to bring it home. At first, I'd been reluctant, afraid that acknowledging it would somehow give it power over me. But as 3 a.m. approached, that crucial hour when the veil between worlds seemed thinnest, the pain became unbearable. The thing twisted and writhed, pushing against my skin from within, as if trying to tear its way out. Passenger? I finally gasped, clutching my arm. I promised to bring you home. The effect was immediate. The creature went still, the pain subsiding to a dull throb. I could still feel its presence, but it was dormant now, waiting. I thought that was the end of it, that I'd survived another night by following the rules. I was wrong. At 6:15 a.m., 15 minutes before dawn, Mr. Caldwell arrived. He never came to the motel during the night shift. That should have been my first warning. "You're doing well," he said, his roomy eyes assessing me with newfound interest. "Better than most. You might be suitable." "Suitable for what?" I asked, instantly on guard. He smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too numerous, too tightly packed. "For the next step, of course. Every night manager who survives this long is offered a choice." He placed something on the desk between us. A key, old and brass, with the number 17 etched into it. "You can leave now," he said. "Walk away, knowing they'll find you eventually. That thing inside you." He nodded toward my arm. "It's just the beginning. A tracker, a seed. It will grow regardless of where you go. Or?" My mouth was dry. "Or you can use this key. See what's in room 17. Face it directly instead of running." I stared at the key, remembering Rule 4. Never touch the key to room 17. "That's breaking the rules," I said. Mr. Caldwell's smile widened. "The rules are for survival, but sometimes survival isn't enough. Sometimes you need to find the door." What door? The way out. It's in room 17. I didn't trust him. Couldn't trust him. But the alternative was running forever, carrying this passenger inside me until what? Until it consumed me? Until it hatched or metamorphosed into something worse? What really happened to Thomas Reeves? I asked. The last night manager. Caldwell's expression shifted. He chose to run. They found him, of course. They always do. He gestured to the key. This is your chance to choose differently. Dawn was approaching. Soon the creatures would retreat, my shift would end, and this opportunity, whatever it really was, would be gone. I reached for the key. As my fingers closed around it, Mr. Caldwell's form shimmered, like heat waves over asphalt. For just a moment, I saw something else standing there, something ancient and patient, with too many eyes and a mouth that split its face vertically. Then it was just Mr. Caldwell again, nodding in approval. Room 17, he said, before dawn. I left the desk, key clutched tightly in my hand, and walked down the hallway toward the room that had remained vacant for 7 years. The air grew thicker with each step, harder to breathe. The wallpaper seemed to pulse, patterns shifting when I wasn't looking directly at them. Outside room 17, I hesitated. Once I opened this door, there would be no turning back. But hadn't I already crossed that line the moment I'd returned for my second shift? I inserted the key. The lock turned with surprising ease, as if eager to be opened. What waited inside wasn't a motel room at all. It was a vast chamber with walls of shifting black stone, ceiling lost in darkness above. In the center stood what I can only describe as a door, though it looked more like a vertical tear in reality, edges ragged and bleeding a cold blue light. And surrounding the door, arranged in a perfect circle, were bodies. Human bodies in various states of decay, each wearing the maroon vest of the Whispering Pines night manager. My predecessors, all those who had been given the key to room 17 and had chosen to enter. Standing before the door was Mr. Caldwell, or rather, the thing that had been pretending to be Mr. Caldwell. In its true form, it was magnificent and terrible, a being of angles that shouldn't exist, wrapped in darkness that moved like living cloth. The threshold, it said, its voice reverberating inside my skull rather than reaching my ears. The way home, but it requires a key to remain open. I understood then. The bodies weren't failed attempts. They were sacrifices, anchors, each one holding the door open a little wider, a little longer. "And you want me to be the next key?" I said. The being made a sound that might have been laughter. "You've already accepted part of us into yourself, the passenger. To become the key is merely the final step." The thing inside my arm stirred at the mention of its name, tendrils pulsing beneath my skin. "What happens if I say no?" "Then you leave, carrying the passenger with you. It will grow, spread. Eventually it will need to come home, and it will use your body to return here. The choice is merely when and how you serve as vessel." Dawn was minutes away. I could feel it approaching like a physical presence, a weight pushing against the wrongness of room 17. I looked at the tier in reality, the impossible door leading somewhere else. Then, at the circle of bodies, the previous night managers who had made their choices, and I made mine. I won't tell you what I decided. That's between me and the threshold, between me and the passenger. But I will tell you this. There's a new night manager at the Whispering Pines Motel now. Young guy, desperate for money, not too concerned about the lack of benefits or the odd hours. Mr. Caldwell hired him yesterday. Tonight will be his first shift. I left a list of rules on the desk for him. 10 rules. All the ones I learned, carefully written out in my own hand. But I didn't include Rule 11. Some things he'll have to discover for himself. I'll be watching, though. We all will, from our various vantage points. After all, everyone at the Whispering Pines has a role to play. The night manager, the owner, the guests who aren't quite what they seem, and now me, in my new position. If you ever find yourself driving down Route 33 in Ohio late at night and see a flickering neon sign for the Whispering Pines Motel, keep driving. Don't stop. Don't look too closely at the figure standing in the office window, watching the road with hungry eyes. It might be wearing my face. But I can assure you it isn't me. Not entirely, anyway.